All right. Once again, hello, everyone, and welcome. Happy Black History Month, and thank you for joining us at this fantastic event hosted by mercyforanimals, reclaiming Black joy through veganism, past, present, and future. We're thrilled to have you here, joining us to hear from some incredible Black vegan advocates. It's important that you are here showing up for initiatives that embody inclusiveness with efforts that are tangible representations and actions to mitigate inequity. Each of our panelists here today are recipients of Mercy4Animals People's Fund, which is a grant program distributing funds and providing resources to Black activists, projects, and Black-led organizations working towards building a compassionate plant-based food system. For us, it's vital to acknowledge here that we are moving beyond cosmetic diversity, diversity clout, and performative allyship, and are immensely grateful to Mercy4Animals and the People's Fund for doing exactly that. 23 leaders and organizations have been funded so far, and they are thrilled to announce that the 2023 application will be opening in May. So you can find out more about the People's Fund by checking out the website. And we're going to go ahead and throw a link in the chat. Yes, it's there. So MFA Organizing to everyone, check out that link if you are interested in hearing about the People's Fund or you know anyone who would like to hear more information. So before we get to our panelists, we would love to hear from you. Please feel free at this time to introduce yourselves in the chat, your name, your pronouns, and where you're joining us from. If there's anything in particular you're hoping to come away with today, feel free to let us know that as well. I'll give you a few moments, don't be shy. I would love to know where you are from right now. I imagine we have attendees from all over the globe. Oh, hi, Christopher Eubanks.
Hey, Chris.
Yeah, shout out. You get some shout outs here. Yes. Thank you. Okay, I see. Yes, Philly, Denver. Woo! Going fast. New York, Portland, Hawaii,
Chicago.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for joining us. It's everywhere, everywhere. Okay, Philly. Beautiful. So I hope this also can help you connect with other advocates in your area if that's something you're interested in doing. I see representation internationally here as well. I couldn't be more thrilled to see that. Wherever you happen to be at this time, we also invite you to acknowledge and give honor to the native land that you occupy. So if you would like to learn more about your specific area, we'll also be putting a link in the chat for you to do so. There it is from MFA. You can take a look at that if you'd like to know more about your area. Also, if you would like to enable closed captions for this event, please do so. We'll be dropping some quick instructions in the chat, but we do kindly ask all attendees to keep your audio muted throughout this event so we can clearly hear each of the panelists. And lastly, feel free to add your pronouns to your Zoom name so you can be acknowledged correctly and respectfully. I am Yvette Baker. Hello, everybody. I'm honored to be your moderator and guide for this event. I'm a writer, social critic, and animal liberation activist. My work in activism is devoted to analyzing the intersections of human and beyond human oppression through an Afro-Indigenous lens, and I aim to empower the vegan community as a movement for total liberation. All right. So for our panelists, up first, I will introduce to you Gwenna Hunter. Gwenna is the founder of Vegans of LA and the first vegan food bank in Los Angeles and the first food bank initiated by a Black woman in the US. So hello, Gwenna.
Hello.
Wave there. There she is. Okay. Next, I introduce to you Ivory Douglas Levert. She's a certified yoga guide and the founder of Plant the Power in Columbus, Ohio, a local nonprofit focused on creating safe spaces for people of color to explore the holistic intersectional benefits of plant-based living. As a wellness educator, Ivory is passionate about curating mindfulness experiences that inspire consciousness, community building, and compassion in the interest of personal well-being, as well as care for land and for the animals who share the earth with us. So hello, Ivory. And finally, we have Bako. EA is a vegan educator and lifestyle influencer. She teaches that veganism is a total liberation practice. Yes, it is. She incorporates pop culture references such as vegan anime food recreations to show that anything can be veganized, as well as shows how veganism fits in with overall well-being. So thank you, EA. Hey, hey. Always lovely to see you. And attendees here live with us, hopefully you will be able to locate, it should pop up on your screen. We are going to be conducting an audience poll question. We've provided for you. We would just love your participation and letting us know what brought you here today. No one's going to put you on blast. This is just interesting and insightful information for us to have. So in advance, thank you for your participation. You should see your poll pop up on your screen. Go ahead and click whichever answer resonates the best with you. I'll give you a moment before I end this poll, and then we'll jump right in. Okay. Whether you want to learn more about the Black vegan experience, want to celebrate Black vegans during Black History Month, want to connect with other Black vegans, or all of the above, we are genuinely so happy to have you here. Thank you for this. I believe everyone has answered. So I'm going to go ahead and end the poll, and I can, okay, share the results so everyone can see. Beautiful. Thank you for that. Well, with that, we will jump right in. And could everyone see the results? Okay, perfect. All right. So for our panelists and myself, so although we have many shared experiences, Black identities are multidimensional. We're not a monolith, and our cultures are not homogeneous. So how do you identify culturally, and how has your decision to live as a vegan played a part in honoring this culture? That is what we would like to know. I will start off, and then I will call on another panelist. I myself identify as Afro-Indigenous, African-American, and Indigenous American. I was raised by Indigenous women with elements of both cultures. So living as vegan, I feel as though I not only honor, but also fight back against the ongoing attempts of annihilating critical elements of these cultures' strength, which is food sovereignty. So Black farmers and Indigenous farmers were very foundational in their communities with long histories of agriculture production. So my divestment from animal agriculture in any way that I can, I give the ultimate honor of the land and recognize that entire identities were stolen from both peoples, whether it's Black or Indigenous, to ultimately poison and profit from our lands for animal agriculture and animal commodification, just for profit. So most of us are at least somewhat familiar with the pillaging of Indigenous lands, but I know more of us can and should be aware of the ongoing struggles faced by Black farmers. After centuries of unfathomable hardship, Black folks were able to acquire and thrive as Black farmers, but this land was also stolen and used for furthering white wealth, now being white-owned farmland. And Black farmland ownership over the past century, 90% of the land has been lost. And this is a much longer conversation, but essentially, and this is only one element of my connection culturally to veganism as it ties into my identity, but this is essential. If you don't have sovereignty of your own food, if you don't have the land and the resources, it's really hard to have a strength as a community you need to thrive and move forward. So that is, veganism has been instrumental, and I can't imagine honoring my culture in a different way, or in living as a non-vegan. and contributing to animal production in ways that has decimated lands and entire cultures. And with that, Gwenna, if you would like to answer this question, we would love to hear from you at this time.
Thank you. And thank you that was such a scholarly response. That was great. Yvette. So I identify as Black and also African American. Unfortunately, I'm not familiar with my roots. I've been trying to track it down through family, but have not been able to successfully do that. So I sit in the identity of Black and African American. The way it has really helped me and dealing with this culture. I'm a 70s baby and I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, and I lived in a food desert. I had no idea what a food desert was until literally a few years ago while I was in this movement. And I'm like, wait a minute, I grew up in a food desert myself and had no idea because I just accepted it. It was just reality for me. It wasn't something that we fought against. We didn't talk about it. We didn't question it. You know, you go to convenient little supermarket, little small marts and I would get my little Suzy Q's and Fritos and little acid juices and eat I don't know if you all remember the 10 TV dinners back in the day. You know, my mom worked full time, so I eat those with the little potatoes and corn and nuggets and a little brownie in there. Like that was just reality. And so I beginning to identify also as a vegan Black and African American started to really wake up and realize like, oh my goodness, I've been getting played this whole entire time and not realizing it. And so being able to take matters into my own hands and learn from the beautiful women that we have on this panel and people that we also have that are watching us, and take that information back to communities that grew up like I did that still don't have the awareness, and share that and, see it grow. And, I'm still learning as a vegan, different things that I've been bamboozled on and awakening to different things. So yeah, for me, and I'll use this word a lot on this call. So, and that word is awakening, like just a lot of awakenings and relearning and remembering for me. So that's what it's done for me. It's just been a whole huge wake up call. And, for me, I've been able to take a lot of it matters into my own hands and take responsibility for what I didn't learn, and just reprogramming myself and teaching people that I love and people that I'm near, and in hopes of, making the world better.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Gwenna. And so relatable about just the lack of awareness we have, where we are situationally. And you talked about, quote unquote, being played. And I thought that was really powerful. And I can really, I think a lot of people resonate with that. Yeah. I did want to quickly mention before I call on Ivory to answer the same question, that if you attendees as an audience have any questions throughout, go ahead and drop your questions in the chat. This session will end with a Q&A portion, so we'll be able to get to your questions at the very end. You can have any or all of the panelists answer your question. So at any time, don't hesitate, just go ahead and drop your question in the chat, and we'll be sure I'll do my best to acknowledge everyone at the end of this event. And with that, we'll move on to Ivory.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Calling in from Columbus, Ohio. So great to see some familiar faces and names, and just grateful to be here today. So for me, very similar to Gwenna, I identify as Black, African-American, person of African descent, and similarly do not know the exact lineage that of my ancestry, unfortunately, due to the way that many Black Americans were brought into the United States. However, I do still feel connected to the traditional kind of West African ancestry, and that is kind of what, until I know for sure, that is what I am kind of most closely connecting with. And so for me, a part of honoring this culture is, and a part of my own awakening, right, has been relearning about what that heritage looked like, and learning about how some of the traditional West African diet was very plant-centered. And that just kind of really being pretty transformative for me, because growing up, I grew up in Texas in the rural South. And, you know, we grew up learning about soul food, and soul food being kind of all of who we were. And that was a representation of Black culture. And to me, it was very freeing to learn that there was culture before soul food, and culture that we essentially had the power to choose. I'm super grateful, and I'll go into this maybe a little bit more later, that that Black folks have been able to take something like soul food and make it joyful, and make it something that can be our culture, and something that feels like love and family. However, for me and my family, which was a part of the reason why I initially started thinking about transitioning to being vegan, that lifestyle was not beneficial for our physical health and well-being, right? And so for me, I found it very freeing to learn about this ancestry that is a part of my DNA, and get connected to that. And so that is a part of what it means for me to honor this culture of connecting to this ancestry, and also in many ways honoring my body is also, in a sense, honoring my culture of Black folks, of Black Americans today, to just take our power back with that. So that's my response.
Thank you so much, Ivory. That was beautiful. And I, again, resonate especially with, giving space and thought to the food, to the culture, the food cultures that we had before our oppressors gave us the food to eat that we consider soul food. So to sort of decolonize, if you're comfortable with that word, or reimagine what our relationship with soul food is like, I think has been really instrumental to a lot of us. So I appreciate that. And you had some very powerful words. I'm going to quickly hand it over to EA for the same question.
Welcome, everyone, and thank you all so much for being here. It's great to see so many people and being able to, share the experience of Black joy with you all today. So thank you to Mercy for Animals for creating the opportunity for us to do this. So I just got back from Nigeria. That's where I'm from. I've been there for the last 3 weeks, and I'm a third culture kid, which basically just means I'm someone who was raised in a different culture than my parents. So I'm also based like Ivory in Columbus, Ohio. And growing up, I was exposed to both cultures. At home, my mom would joke that while you're at home, you're in Nigeria, and when you go to school and you go out, you're in America. And I'm sure a lot of other immigrant kids have that same experience as well, because a lot of our parents want us to stay connected to our roots and know who we are. And I'm very, lucky to know like my background and know where my family comes from, down to the very village where my mom and my dad were born. And so when we lived in the United States, actually we started living in a very small town, Warren, Ohio, and there was no Nigerian food. So I came here when I was 2 years old, and my mom really didn't know how to use the American ingredients to make Nigerian food, because there wasn't even anything as simple as the powdered version of yam that we have back at home. And it's not the same yam you're used to in the United States. So she couldn't even find the basics for that. So my dad had joked one time that one of his friends tried to make our pounded yam for him, and the powder they used was Bisquick that used to make pancakes. And it was like the worst food he's had in his entire life. But if you're not familiar with like swallows or like pounded yam, it's very similar to the texture of like a thicker mashed potatoes. And basically it's our main starchy carbohydrate that you eat it by hand, you pinch off a piece and then you dip it in a sauce or a stew. And it's very well known around West Africa. There's different versions of it. They're not all called fufu. So if you've heard of fufu and pounded yam, they're not exactly the same thing, but a very similar look and texture. But fun fact about like my background is that because I didn't eat that much Nigerian food when we first moved to the States because of the rural small town we lived in, I didn't really acquire a taste for many Nigerian foods. And I know that my mom, she loves to cook things with dried fish, and I've always hated any type of fish. And I always hated another popular food in Nigeria is goat meat. I've always had an aversion towards that. So I basically didn't grow up eating like my traditional cultural foods. But you know, when I went vegan, that was when I started talking to my mom more about our food heritage and found out that my mom didn't actually start eating meat until she was around 12 years old. Because eating meat in a lot of places that are redeveloping and reemerging countries, coming back from, you know, what's happened through colonialism, they are just recently starting to add more meat and flesh protein to their diets because most traditional, I would say, West African food is mostly plant-based. We eat a lot of corn, cassava, yams, as I was talking about, millet, different types of beans, and things like that. We have a lot of different vegetables. Nigeria is like one of the bread baskets of Africa. So lots of vegetables, lots of fruits because it's the tropics. And so my mom said, when you're young, you know, back in her time, they actually don't feed you meat because it's so expensive. It's really hard to get your hands on it. So even my dad was saying his first time eating meat wasn't until college, and it had nothing to do with like ethics or anything like that. It was simply an access issue. If they were able to get their hands on it, they'd been more than happy to have the calories because actually they were in a situation where they didn't have much means growing up. So their diet was strictly based on what they could find access to eat and just food to get full. It wasn't based on their personal beliefs or anything like that. But just learning that my parents were eating, you know, completely plant-based growing up makes me feel like eating plant-based is part of our traditional culture. And eating plant-based for me is going back to my roots. Even though even nowadays, I don't typically eat that many Nigerian foods, but going vegan has made me want to learn and experiment, you know, what foods that we have that can either be easily veganized or are traditionally vegan. So that's something I've talked to my mom about, how we're gonna work on some actual content for my social media, cooking traditional Nigerian foods, which I'm sure a lot of people would like to see that. And I would like to experience eating more of my traditional foods as well. I didn't have the chance to eat that much growing up. And so I just feel like veganism, in addition to it being like going back to my ancestral roots of eating plant-based, it's also about, you know, preserving the land and the water. Climate change is, as we know, is disproportionately affecting, you know, reemerging economies and impoverished, you know, countries more than it's impacting people who live in, you know, countries like the United States and other places like that, who contribute the majority of the fossil fuels and the greenhouse gas pollution. But the impacts are more affecting people who live in the globalized South. So eating plant-based to me is a way to preserve our water, our land, and also teaching others, because even if I'm just one person, well, it takes a lot of people to make a change. So I just want to be an inspiration to others that, you know, you can be Black and be plant-based, and actually it's not, you know, it's not new. It's something that's been around for a very long time. And there's many traditional dishes that never incorporated any type of animal flesh that we can eat if you want to, you know, stick to like more traditional foods than the modern convenience foods that we have today.
Thank you, EA. You certainly are an example and setting an example, and we appreciate you. And to your point about looking into the plant-based roots of a lot of our ancestral diets or a lot of our backgrounds, I think we tend to, our society can romanticize, in my culture, for example, the hunting aspect of culture, whereas really a lot of food, our food staples we have in common, the beans, the rice, the beans, the corn, rice. We don't really talk about that, and we think of it as something that's, being veganized, when really there's just a connection to our roots, as you mentioned. So thank you so much for that. We will move into the next question. In the interest of time, we'll push right through and get all the juicy stuff out. So on the next question I have for the panelists is, sometimes seen as a departure or betrayal from our cultures and traditions, in what ways do you see veganism as a means to honor the philosophies, ideologies, or values of your cultural identity or identities? So I'm going to go ahead and take this question first, and I do realize the relationship it has to the first question. I want us to go a little bit deeper and understand or explain ways that veganism is in fact not at odds, although sometimes seen as such, with honoring our cultures or honoring our identities within those cultures. So for me, I'll keep it brief. I just wanted to say that I believe all of us on the panel, all of us here in the audience, we are aware that veganism does not hold an identical philosophy to the ways in which our ancestors viewed animals or the world around them. But frankly, I'm least surprised as a Black woman and Black women as the fastest growing segment of veganism within the vegan movement. I'm least surprised that we are adapting and evolving for the greater good. And I use the word evolving intentionally, not meant to offend anyone, but that's the way I view it. So coming from a culture that honors human responsibility to protect water, the air, the soil, the plants, and the animals, I think it certainly has that in common with veganism. And so living as a vegan, my tradition and practices, my lifestyle looks different from those of my ancestors, but my necessities are also different. And so my practices look different, as they should in a modern society. And being Afro-Indigenous, I think it's important that we broaden our view of our identities that many people associate with grave historical oppression. Yes, there is still oppression, and yes, there is still inequality, but we are also in these post-colonial societies, and people of the global majority, as we are here on this panel, should not be erased from these conversations that are about us, our cultures, and how we're choosing to honor them going forward. And going forward, for me, I see the best honor, the best justice, and to healing all of the damage done as living as a vegan. So I will head this back to you, Gwenna, for your response to this question.
Thank you. So if I stick to the identity of Black and African American, I have to say there's not a lot that I remember of like honoring other than like eating soul food and dressing a certain way and other certain types of things. I have, and I love the word evolve. That is like one of my favorite words. I've evolved since becoming vegan. Just naturally, this empathic ability and sensitivity to the planet, which I never possessed before. I mean, I didn't, it wasn't like littering and just, being destructive or anything like that. I had respect, but I've developed this true, like really natural love for the planet. And I don't mean just like, okay, I'm a part of this planet. Like there was one time I was at an event, it was a weekend, actually it was like a 3-4 day, kind of like a hippie event, like a cultural celebration of love and things like that. And I remember waking up in the morning and I felt this really deep connection to the planet, like a conscious living being. And I never felt that before, like not just in my head, but I literally felt almost like a love, like a true connection that you have with another human being that you meet and you're like, oh, I feel like I've known you forever. That's how I felt. And I don't have that same strong feeling, but some of it still stayed with me. And so for me, I'm kind of creating my own kind of ideologies and philosophies and connection to the planet that I didn't really grow up or understand having. So it's been a journey. Like I said, I have all this sensitivity. I cry looking at anything when the app, like, I don't even know, like I said, I always say, I don't even know who I am anymore. It's like this whole new person has emerged over the past, 7 years that I've been involved in this, that is just sensitive. And I keep learning and evolving and learning new things about the earth. And, now I'm really paying attention to like water. There's something, that I want to learn more about the connection with water and, the air and just the trees. Like I've fallen in love with trees. Like I have a tree. I call him my husband. He's my tree husband. He's this really tall tree that's down the street that I go visit and talk to every so often. So yeah, I'm just creating these different types of relationships with the planet that just feel good to me. And as I step into more bravery, I want to share those things with people as well. So that's my answer. I'm sticking to it.
As you should. Thank you so much, Gwenna. And that was beautiful. And knowing you personally, it moves me so much to know how you've grown and to see you in your light, who you are now. And I hope that people will continue to be inspired by everything you stand for and all of the work that you're doing. And Ivory, I would love to hear from you next.
Awesome. Yes, I can also very much relate to what you shared, Gwenna. So much beautiful imagery of just being out in nature. And, it also makes me think about my response to this question a little bit more too. I think we as Black folks have always had a connection to the earth and to animals. However, I think for many of us, based on the racism and challenges that we've experienced in the United States, have been in a sense of survival mode. And I think when you're in survival mode and you are, worried about if you're, your safety, or if you're going to be able to eat, or just getting by day to day, where do you have space to think about how the animals are doing? Where do you have space to frolic outdoors? You know what I'm saying? Like, where do you have space for that? And so I think this narrative that, Black folks don't do veganism or don't do nature is just such a myth. I think that we just haven't had the space and capacity to be able to experience it. But kind of going back to my initial answer, with our, West African ancestry, and also even just thinking about, the ancestry that I can most closely connect with, my grandmothers, great grandmothers, all of those pieces. They were very connected to the land. My paternal grandmother, until the day she died, she was always in her garden. She had a couple of acres of land, and it's just something that has consistently inspired me. I remember growing up playing outdoors and picking plums and different things off the trees, getting watermelons. Being in Texas, that was a huge thing, right? So for me, that's always been a part of who we are, coming from a land that is very fruitful. That's in our DNA. I think something that I care a lot about is how to help not only myself, but us as a people get reconnected to that, to feel that sense of power, to love on nature and let nature love on us, to love on the animals and let the animals love on us, right? To recognize the beauty that can come from that. I think a lot of us are so disconnected from that, but it is a part of our culture. It is a part of who we are. And I think when we can have more space away from the everyday barriers and challenges that we go through, I think more of us can really experience that and feel that sense of beauty.
Thank you very much, Ivory. Yes, I think it's certainly there's a lot to consider there, especially about who we are fundamentally. You drew such a beautiful picture of like a holistic connection to everything around us. And I think that, you know, a lot of that was broken forcefully. And it's really beautiful to see so many of us reconnecting and revisiting and rethinking about all of those things that you mentioned, and especially mindful of how many challenges we still face today, and that we are finding our way through, yet still to come to this place of love and peace and compassion. I can't think of anything that's more beautiful to witness. So thank you for sharing. I'm going to move it along to EA.
I'll just say that everything that Ivory said is 100% correct. As someone who didn't grow up in Nigeria, but I've been back several times and heard all of the stories from my parents about what it was like to grow up there. My parents both started life out as farmers, and being connected to the land was basically their traditional way of living. My mom used to even feed us when we were very small. I'm talking about myself when I was less than 2, and my other siblings was all through farming. And one thing that's really sad is that as time goes on, a lot of Nigerians are stepping away from farming as a means to feed themselves and their families. And now we're experiencing high rates of food insecurity. And it's not because the land has any problems. Nigeria is one of the most fertile lands in Africa. We have lots of water, we have lots of green space. In fact, that's why one of the colors of our flag is green, is because we're one of the fruit baskets of Africa. And I think what's happening these days is a lot of young people, they want to live like Western countries, and they want to work in an office, and they kind of think of farming as something that's lowly and something that is like the old, traditional way, and they want to be modern. So I think we need to reimagine what progress looks like and appreciate, where we came from, and ways to continue, the practice of farming for ourselves, our family, and our community. But maybe the thing that they need to work on is doing it in a more mechanized way, because actually the way my mom farmed growing up and, in her early adulthood was all by hand. There was no equipment whatsoever. And so it's like our farming can just be more mechanized. That way more young people will be interested in getting into the farming industry and not thinking that it's like beneath them to go into farming because they're doing it by hand. One of the reasons I am vegan is because I do believe in food sovereignty and food security. And I think the best way to do that is to grow your own food. And because I don't have access to a farm here in the United States where I live now, I have a small garden, and that just gives me some peace of mind that I'm doing my own small little part, even though the funny thing about gardening in the US, especially if you're like a new gardener, is you spend more money on the equipment and the soil and the seeds than you actually bear fruit from it. So it's more of like a hobby than something that's actually sustainable. But maybe if I get better at it as time goes, it'll be something that can actually be a supplement to what I'm doing now. But it's just that feeling of getting in the earth and digging and planting seeds and reaping your reward at a later date, and like the time you have to wait, that feels so spiritual and so healing. And I think a lot of people need access to that, because I think that that's like at the core of humanity. We're part of the earth, and we've disconnected ourselves by, being in these boxes, which are, our 4 walls where we live, and we're not getting as much nature as we used to. So I think that for me, like honoring my cultural identity is just doing the little tiny gardening that I can do here, and teaching others that farming practice is a good thing, and we need to go back to doing more of that.
Thank you, EA. You are definitely farmer goals for me personally. I've seen some of your work, and yeah, I'm inspired. And yes, I couldn't agree more that more of us should, and hopefully we can going forward, get involved in producing our own food, not only for the connection spiritually, holistically, but practically. So hopefully, and I'm glad to say and see that there is a large number of Black farming movements and initiatives to try and reinstill some of the knowledge and skills that we had from the past that have been lost And I think this is also plays right into the hand of moving forward with a vegan future. So thank you for that, EA. We will move into our last question here before a Q&A session. So I would like to ask, or I will say, people often believe that when they go vegan, they are losing parts of themselves rather than gaining and liberating themselves. How has veganism invited you to experience Black joy? And I will say for myself, it is unfortunate, and I believe it's misguided, that there's something inherently seen as anti-vegan about Blackness. And we've all heard at one point or another that veganism is inherently a white thing, or that compassion for animals is a white thing, or even that veganism is a form of cultural imperialism in the way that it supposedly demands people of color to adhere to standards created by Europeans, an anti-speciesist philosophy. And I would say that animals being soulless is not our concept. Our connections with and knowledge of other animals was forcefully broken. Same with other elements of the earth, soil, water, air, that they are profitable resources and no longer sacred relatives. So I'm not willing to credit Europeans for my connection with other animals and disregard the centuries of kinship and respect and the using of only what was necessary, sort of in the same veins as us as vegans today doing what's practicable. You know, we can't be perfect, but we do what we can. Same as a lot of our history, our cultures, what they once were before they were broken and fragmented. So for me, Black joy is limitless, but to reach greater heights, I find it necessary to decolonize mentally and physically as many aspects of my life as I can. And with veganism at its core being a stance on anti-oppression, I can't see better fit, a way to live my life. There are ways to practice veganism and to weaponize it as oppressive. And that's a conversation and a topic about what we call white veganism, which you should look into if you've not heard of the term. But veganism itself does not need to be decolonized. It is anti-oppression, and that is as decolonial as it gets. And with that, I will pass back to Gwenna, please, for you to answer this question.
I just got to give you one of these. That was, that was so good.
Thank
That
you,
was,
Gwenna.
I don't even know what to say. Like, that was perfection. I love everything that you said. And yeah, that was beautiful. I don't even know what I'm going to say now. That was just so amazing.
Gwenna, you muted yourself.
Thank you. I don't know if you heard me just giving you praises, Yvette, but that your response was absolutely fantastic.
Thank you, Gwenna. We're moving right through, so no pressure for any of the panelists to go on any long, exhaustive answers. Just a short one will do, so we can move into the Q&A, and then we'll be able to wrap up everything. All right?
Sounds good. Sounds good. For me, like, it's a term called animism, which means that everything has a soul. And I was always on this like little journey for a long time. And then when I got involved in veganism, I realized animals have a soul, duh, but didn't even think about that beforehand. So for me, it's opened up this whole new realm of spirituality and consciousness and different things I can investigate and play with and find out. And what I'll say about being a Black vegan, one of the things that I find to be very beautiful, I'm going to slide this in here because we talked about it on our little call the other day, is the diversity in bodies. I know a difference in white veganism versus Black veganism is that in the mainstream white veganism, it's a different idea of beauty. And in Black veganism, I feel like we really embrace everything, and everything is beautiful to us, and all types of food, everything is just wonderful. So I don't know if I answered the question, but that's my response.
Yes, you did, and beautifully as such. Thank you, Gwenna. Just in the interest of time, I'm going to keep things moving along. So Ivory, if you'd like to answer this question, we'd love to hear from you.
Yes. Also echo all the snaps to all of you on this panel today. I'll share briefly. I think the thing that jumps to mind for me is intersectionality. And before I was vegan, I was very much into intersectionality and just kind of really being into, you know, this kind of social justice mindset of recognizing the multiple identities that we experience and how those coexist and impact one another. And so now beginning to learn more about intersectional veganism, right? I think it relates to a lot of what you said, Yvette, around really just this total liberation for all beings, and you know, not just seeing it for human folks, but for seeing it for everyone. I think that has just felt very aligned for me as someone who has always been very social justice oriented and has always, yeah, just had that within my heart. And so to me, it just feels like I'm able to just be more in line with all of my values by being vegan. And on top of, I think eating this way just energizes me. I feel better, my body feels better, all those things. So I'll stop there.
Thank you, Ivory. And last but not least, EA, if you'd like to answer this question for us.
Yeah, so I echo what everyone else has said. You've given great answers. For me, veganism is an extension of compassion. I believe that we should offer compassion and justice to all living beings. So veganism for me is just an coming full circle and extending my circle of compassion to other animals. I was always extending it to other humans and thinking that I loved animals, but I was also eating them too. And then I realized that when I became vegan, that I was actually living out my true values. And being vegan is aligned with my core ethics and philosophy about, you know, justice, compassion, you know, love of, you know, other beings and nature and our planet. And so I feel like I didn't lose anything by going vegan. I actually became more of who I am. And living in alignment not only helps you feel great mentally and spiritually, but echoing what Ivory said, you feel healthier, you feel energized. I immediately noticed that I had more clarity of mind and just more peacefulness. And I think that this is a great lifestyle for not only you know, Black folks, but for everyone. I want to see the world shift to a plant-based food system, and us as humans to learn ways to make that possible by, you know, improvements and food access and food sovereignty, so that everyone can have access to live as plant-based lives as possible. And just continuing with the talk about social justice, veganism isn't just a diet, so it's a full social justice movement. And I think that that needs to be boosted and talked about more, so people aren't thinking, oh, we're just a food police and we just want to tell everybody what they can and can't eat, but we're actually talking about who they can or can't eat. These are other living beings with feelings and emotions, and with, they have compassion too, and they have families too, and other animals have friends too. So we're just honoring them by keeping them off our plates.
Thank you, EA, exactly. And snaps to everybody. Thank you so much. EA, yes, what you just said, that can't be highlighted enough, that we are a part of a social justice movement here. And so considering that there may be someone in the audience or listening to this recording who is new to veganism or unfamiliar, we are certainly talking beyond just the scope of food and any food agriculture. So definitely a lot to consider, the parallels between all of the social justice work that we are doing or that others are doing, and the fight for animal liberation, as the two are very connected in many ways. So I wish I can get into more of that at this time, but this would not be the discussion for that. But please follow the work of these panelists and you will find a lot of such information. At this time, feel free to keep sliding into the chat, as I would like to move into a Q&A portion to answer any of your questions. I did see a question earlier, and I can start there. And then as we were going over this question, feel free to drop another I don't need to call you out by name. You know, you can stay anonymous if you want it. Send it to me directly if that's more comfortable to you, however you wish. But as such, I will get into the first question I found here in the chat. And that is, if there was one vegan food you could say is the most important to you culturally, what would that be? So I will allow any of our panelists to answer this question. As many of you who would like to answer, you can do so. At least one of us, hopefully. So you can just go ahead and chime in or raise your hand.
I'll add, I'll say mac and cheese. So I was really excited about being able to explore vegan mac and cheese. Especially if my husband was like, that was like his toughest part in becoming vegan. And so I think that was like one of the first things that we were like, okay, we got to get this down and we got to get it right. Because there's a certain way you got to do it, you know, and it needs to kind of have a creamy texture, and it needs to, you know, have all the right seasonings, because if you don't season it right, you know, you didn't do it right. It's not representing the culture. So I think that was for sure the first one for me, is getting that baked vegan mac and cheese, which kind of feels kind of connected to the soul food that I spoke about a little earlier.
And I'll jump in on this one as well. Someone dropped this in the chat, but it was exactly what I was going to say, which is plantains. They didn't have plantains in the, you know, the small rural town that I lived at when I first moved to Ohio, when I was 2 years old. But when we moved to a metropolitan city, plantains was one of the foods that I fell in love with, and it's one of our traditional foods that my parents grew up eating. And plantains we made in so many different ways, but just like, you know, fried with salt and pepper, the traditional style that I grew up with, I could eat plantains forever.
And then I'll just add, for me, it was the meats, sausage and bake. Even though I hadn't eaten some of that stuff in a while, but being able to have plant-based meats was great. But just for the sake of the conversation, I'll throw it out there: collards and black-eyed peas. I always thought you had to have smoked turkey and collard greens. Like, I didn't realize you could eat it without that, because that was just like part of the programming. So to have that in a plant-based version with some, I think someone made some for me one time, they put liquid smoke, and I'm like, liquid smoke, what is that? And it, game changer. So yeah, those two items. You're on mute.
Thank you, panelists. Thank you, Gwenna, for letting me know I muted myself. I am a technology queen, if you can't tell. So I will move into another question I'm finding here in the chat. It essentially says there's a lot of food justice academic work getting shutting down veganism as a legitimate component, often using the claim that it is white-centric and gentrifying. And the question is how we have responded to this. You know, this is the topic of the invisible Black vegan experience. If anyone would like to take on quickly answering this question.
I wouldn't mind answering that question. I had an experience tabling a few years ago in a community called Levert Park, which is also known as Africatown. And I was tabling, and a brother came up to me and he was like, "You promote veganism." He's like, "What are you doing for the Black community?" What, you know, like literally it was that question, like, why are you here? Why are you promoting veganism? This is a white thing. You need to do something else. And I'm like, brother, this is doing something for the Black community. And I broke some things down. Can't say exactly all the things that I said, but I let him know that this is our way of life. This is us. This is what we do. This is how we eat. And don't be fooled by the packaging and the way the message is portrayed, that it's not Black, or that it's not promoting social justice or unity. And so after we had our conversation, because I had to get a little deep and a little bit honest, he understood. But I think you have to explain that, because like, I think Ivory, you were saying earlier, like if you're dealing with surviving, and somebody's coming up to you talking about eating some Beyond Meat or something, like, what the heck is that? So you have to give grace for people, because not everybody, this isn't an important topic to everybody. And so everyone doesn't have this on the forefront of their mind. So I think having grace and understanding and having an honest conversation really helps.
Right. Absolutely. So what Gwenna said, and I will add that we keep it pushing. So, you know, not everything it even warrants a response at times, whether that be just verbally or with our energy and our efforts. We have a lot of work to do. We're very busy. And so we do what we need to do. And those who are ready to receive what we're doing and the messages that we're giving are ready, and those who aren't. And it's just the way that we've faced more difficult hardships, and we are used to the invisibility, I would say. So one last question I can get to. I see some great ones coming through, but I did want someone to quickly address if there are important steps non-Black vegan allies can take to make sure we are supporting and uplifting your community. That is a question in the chat. If one person wants to briefly take on what allies can do to uplift and support.
I can take it on. I think one of the most important things to do is amplify Black voices, amplify Black vegans, and, you know, don't speak over us, or, you know, find opportunities to insert why Black people should be vegan. But when I think any message comes along better when you're talking to your own community. So just recommend, if it's social media that you're dealing with someone, you know, recommend accounts of Black vegans that people can follow and gain inspiration from, especially other Black people who may be prospective vegans, or who want to eat healthier, or who don't understand why Black people should care about this cause. Sometimes I think it can come off confrontational to Black folks when a white person is telling them why they should be vegan, or I don't know, it sometimes, even if you're being the sweetest and the nicest about it, it's just that trauma, that past trauma, and those walls and barriers that are put up. So just continue to amplify and promote the work of Black vegans.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much, EA. And thank you to Mercies for Animals, who has helped us in the chat here. Other tangible ways to support us and our work, what we're doing. You can find that in the chat. And thank you very much to all of our attendees today. And before we depart, I did want to let you know that there will be a post-event survey, a very brief survey, a few quick questions. If you can answer, it helps us and helps Mercy for Animals sort of get your feedback on events like this, and so we can make them better and more tailored to your needs going forward. So we appreciate you immensely. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you, each of you in the audience, for attending. You have been lovely. Yeah, you are welcome. All these great messages in the chat. You'll find the survey there. So go ahead and do that before you go, if you don't mind. And everyone, have a beautiful day. Have a beautiful rest of your Black History Month. And thank you so much for joining us. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.